Good morning, welcome to Britain's Newsroom. This morning from Bromley in Kent, the Garden of England it is, of course. And I'm joined now, I'm talking this morning to lots of locals, joined now by one of the very important men here, MP Sir Bob Niel. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Conservative MP. Let's walk and talk so we can take in some of the beautiful sights of Bromley.
Yep, great to see you.
We're very happy to be here. Just explain to us what impact ULEZ being incorporated into Bromley today, what impact is it having on the locals?
Well, it's going to hit a lot of local people and a lot of local businesses very hard. We're very much outer London. As it happens, we have the best air quality in Greater London. We've got the lowest levels of pollution. A third of our borough is green belt. We go right down to the borders of Kent. After I leave you, Bev, I'm going down to Biggin Hill. That's a village in the green belt. But they're going to be clobbered with this ridiculous £12.50 a day cut charge.
So, of course, Sadiq Khan would say, Bob, if you want your constituents to enjoy clean air and to make the most of these wonderful green spaces you have, I'm so sorry, but it's time to give up on polluting cars. We've had them too long. It's a luxury we can no longer afford from an environmental point of view.
I think there's 2 points to make. First, in relation to that's his alleged reason for doing this. I don't believe it really is. As far as we're concerned, as I say, our air quality is the best. Also, though, we have the largest percentage of pensioners in Greater London. A lot of those people are on fixed incomes. They've got an old car that they may have had for 10, 15 years. It's well maintained. They use it to run to the shops. A couple of miles into Bromley, go and see some friends.
Right.
Its mileage is probably a few hundred miles a year, if that.
So what does this mean for those pensioners then? Does it mean that some of them will just give up on driving now?
Well, it's exactly right. I had a letter from a gentleman who's 83, only came in on Sunday on my email. He is going to be trapped in his home, effectively. Can't get out to meet family, friends. He's going to be dependent now on others to come to get him because he cannot afford to invest in a new car. And this ridiculous idea that you're going to get a ULEZ compliant car for £2,000 is really for the birds.
Yeah.
So people like that have lost their independence because of the mayor. It's his direct fault and his responsibility.
Now, he isn't here today. He would say it is about air pollution. He would say that he was voted in to be in control of this wonderful city, and this is what he believes is the right thing to do for the longer term, for the grandchildren of your constituents, and that really, frankly, it's just time for a change.
Well, everybody knows that we want to improve air pollution. Everybody knows that we're getting cleaner and better vehicles coming along now. The government's been encouraging that, and we're phasing out older vehicles by 2030. But he's doing this in a rush, purely for the sake of political grandstanding, and also actually to fill a hole in his own coffers. Because Sadiq Khan bust the TfL budget long before this ever came along, when he imposed a ridiculous fare freeze he couldn't afford. And then, of course, their finances fell apart in the pandemic. So he's actually taxing outer Londoners to fill up the deficit that he created, the black hole he created in TfL's finances. That's the real reason for this.
So what can the Conservatives do? What can Rishi Sunak do? He certainly changed the rhetoric about the motorist after the Uxbridge by-election.
Right.
It was quite noticeable, I think, to a lot of our viewers and listeners were in touch, and they were quite heartened by the mood music they were hearing from Rishi Sunak. But what else can he do?
Well, what I hope he'll do is he'll support an amendment that's been put down in the House of Lords by my colleague Lord Moynihan, which would require the consent of the London boroughs affected by any extension of this scheme. It wouldn't be retrospective, but it would cut it off from the day that Act came into Parliament. We could do that reasonably quickly, not immediately, but it will give people light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
That's one thing the government can do. The second thing, of course, is it's a political one, frankly, and that's to rally round and get a change of mayor. Because our candidate for Mayor, Susan Hall, is committed to scrapping ULEZ on day one.
Yeah.
So there's a political action, there is a legislative action, not as quick as I'd like, but at least it will be something. We mustn't give up on this at all.
What is the city of Bromley? Is it a city or a town? I'm so sorry, I should know the answer to that.
Officially, it's a London borough. I think we call it a town, but of course it's a collection of communities. Bromley, Orpington, Beckenham, Chislehurst,
Right.
Biggin Hill, all part of the big London borough of Bromley. The largest borough in London, as I say, one of the greenest in London too.
And what is it like? I mean, just to tell our viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with this area, is it affluent? Is it prosperous? Is it a particularly diverse area?
It's actually a much more mixed area than people think. People assume, suburbs must mean leafy and prosperous. Well, parts are, But as I say, we've also got the highest pensioner population in London. We have also areas of real deprivation and low income. We have a number of between the wars estates. We've also got areas like Penge, which are much closer to inner London. And we've got quite a lot of people living on fixed incomes. We've got a mixed range of income levels here. So I've got two communities in my constituency where we've got a lot of people on minimum wage, on no wage jobs, a lot of people running small businesses, the classic white van man that you find in this part of London. In my own family, we've got people who need carers to come in to help my elderly mother.
Yeah.
They have little cars to run around in.
Yeah.
They can't afford expensive cars.
Yeah.
They're not on big wages.
Yeah.
And they're the people who are going to be hit by this.
OK. Bob, it's lovely to see you this morning. Sir Bob Niel there, MP for this area, Conservative MP. Don't go anywhere, will you? You can go and get me a coffee if you want. I think I just told Sir Bob Niel to go and get me a cappuccino. We're not short of coffee shops in this area. Now, Jim Dale is here this morning. Jim, it's very difficult to argue when you hear Bob talking about the impacts on some of the most marginalised people, those on low income, pensioners who have a little run around they've had for a few years, who thought they could carry on visiting the grandchildren in it and not have to pay this £12.50 a day or risk the £90 fine. So just give us some sort of proportionality here as to why we need to have this.
The reason we have to have it is the direction of travel in terms of health, in terms of environment, in terms of small steps. And I say that as a meteorologist, in terms of the climate change side of things. That's all we can do. We can't do this on our own, and this has been replicated in certain ways across the country. So we're standing here in a pedestrian zone, which is quite nice. No cars, no fumes, apart from a few cigarettes here and there. But it's actually quite pleasant. So I approach this perhaps not as a scientist, if you like, or working within the scientific community. I approach it in terms of saying common sense. This is common sense. This is the direction of travel. And while I have sympathy for the implementation or in the difficulties that certain members of the community of the population will have, always when you make major changes, this will happen. I think you've just got to look at the big picture and the direction of travel. And for me, the environment and health come first.
Do we have much clear science on how bad cars are for the environment, petrol and diesel cars?
Yeah, I think we do. We could have this interview sat behind a diesel car if you wish, and I don't think we come out of it very well after about an hour.
The irony, Jim, is that there was a very noisy, very smelly-looking diesel generator just here with one of the donut stands, and I thought, well, he's not going to be ULEZ compliant with his generator, is he? And that's the trouble. We see this sort of contradictions when you move around a city like this.
There will always be little things here and there. You mentioned the classic cars earlier. Perhaps the reason for that is because they are classic cars and they can get away with it, but they're probably arguably a small proportion of the total amount of cars, and what we're trying to do, or what the Sadiq Khan's trying to do, is trying to implement that across the board, if you like, more of the population involved. And I think when you look at Londoners and ask them, and the polls that I've seen, the vast majority of them accept that this is the direction of travel.
Okay, Jim, thank you. I like the fact that you're saying direction of travel. It's got a lovely sort of appropriateness to that. And I was just watching a skateboarder go flying past, and I thought, well, the next generation, they're quite happy on skateboards. I wouldn't be happy on a skateboard. Justin Cockett joins me now. I imagine you wouldn't be happy on a skateboard either, would you? But you have been driving an electric car for many years.
Oh, yes. We bought our first electric car in 2014, and I bought my current one in 2016.
You must have had one of the first off the production line.
Yeah, I think we were pretty early. We had a BMW i3, and then in 2016 I bought a Tesla Model S, and my wife changed the i3 for a Tesla Model 3 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and the reason we drive electric cars is because they're better. They accelerate faster, they're cheaper to maintain, they are cheaper to run,
Yeah.
they need very little maintenance, and frankly, the whole experience is fantastic. Love them.
Yeah, so you, even though you're pro-electric car, you have your concerns about ULEZ from a data security point of view. Now, this is something I don't think gets enough coverage.
No.
All those cameras which are going up around this borough now, around the whole of Greater London, are filming us, surveilling us, and keeping that data?
Yeah, so the ANPR cameras, now I don't know the individual camera.
So that's automatic number plate recognition.
That's right, that's what's being used. The point is that that is information about where people are travelling, how they're travelling. And I question the security because, for example, in the United States, they have something called the NDAA, which is the National Defence Authorization Act, which basically means certain companies cannot be providers to critical infrastructure in the US without a defence authorization. And we saw a few years ago with mobile and telecoms networks, some manufacturers being banned from those networks. And the question is what's going on with the type of equipment and etc. that's being used for these networks. Now the other problem is a large number of these cameras have actually been stolen. So once you steal a camera, it's a bit like stealing a laptop.
Yeah.
You know, there is information on that relating to its security credentials, its network access, etc., etc. And how is that being managed? What I would really like to see is some evidence that GCHQ or somebody like this has done a full and thorough investigation, not only into this network, but all the council networks as well. And I think a lot of them will be found wanting.
That could be another legal loophole, of course, that does get the London Assembly into some sort of trouble and to get them tied up in all sorts of judicial knots, actually.
Yeah.
Because if it is found, I think what you're saying, if it is found that these cameras are containing all of this data and we haven't given our permission, effectively, then there could be a huge class action.
You've got DPA, you've got
Data
the
protection.
GDPR, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. It's all sorts of it, and this has all been put in a bit of a rush, and I rather suspect there'd be some corners cut. I don't know, but I think somebody somewhere needs to ask the question. Needs to be a proper freedom of information request, and maybe that's something GB News could ask for. I don't know.
But you do think that in terms of moving towards electric vehicles, not necessarily for the planet, but for the individual, is a good thing to move towards?
Yes, so without a doubt. I mean, I drive an electric vehicle because they are better. I had my first test drive in 2013 and I was blown away and I thought, I've got to have this, that's why I bought an electric vehicle. I mean, the environmental credentials are a nice bonus on top. And I have a super eco house and all this sort of thing, air source heat pump. I have that.
You must be very rich, Justin.
No, I did most of it myself. Funnily enough, I did it.
Because that's part of the problem, isn't it? Some of the environmental cars, the Teslas, they don't give them away.
No, they don't. But when you add up the total cost of ownership, even when I bought mine, the total cost of ownership, given the mileage I was doing at the time, made a lot of sense.
Okay.
And that's how it came. But no, I mean, this 2030 ban petrol cars. I just wonder why the government do it, because no matter, it doesn't matter, because by 2030 people will be buying electrics anyway because they'll be cheaper and better, so why bother, upsetting people?
All right, well, Sadiq Khan is upsetting people today. Justin, thank you so much for joining me there. There are a lot of people upset about it today, of course, Andrew, but of those people who think we should be relying less on our cars, that we should be looking after the planet for the next generation. Lots of kids walking around here today. Of course, it's the summer holidays, flying around on skateboards. Maybe there's a middle ground somewhere that has to be met. Back to you.
All right, that's Bev Turner in Bromley talking about the introduction of the absolutely loathed ultra-low emission zone. It's